tomorrow is Memorial Day, so happy Memorial Day weekend to everyone. I'm continuing to answer questions that have come from readers of You Are the Universe, Discovering Your Cosmic Self and Why It Matters. The book is co-written with Menas Kafatos, who is a cosmologist, climate change expert, and quantum physicist. And so today's question is from Jennifer L. She says, today I was reading You Are the Universe while doing my spiritual reading work. Here are my questions to the authors and discussion forum. What is the level of consciousness from which we observe? How do we know what level we are observing from? Are we observing the personality of the universe or the soul? How might this awareness change our perception? In reflecting upon Deepak's book, How to Know God, I understand so far that it is possible to become aware of the levels of consciousness as we are able to talk about and define these levels. How might this awareness be applied to scientific observation? What should be the implications for scientific research? And then she quotes me, you will never trust your intuition until you identify with it. Okay, so first of all, let's start by first defining consciousness, which we've done many times before, but never hurts to reinforce it. So one of the best definitions I've heard is from Rupert Spira, who says consciousness is that in which all experience occurs, that in which all experience is known, and that out of which all experience is made. Others have called consciousness the knowing element in every experience. There are two kinds of experiences, right? Perceptual experiences, which means through the five senses, sound, touch, sight, taste, and smell. And then there are mental experiences, which are, of course, thoughts, feelings, emotions, imagination, intention, insight, intuition, creativity, archetypal awareness, higher consciousness, and then self-actualization or self-realization. So those are all experiences that happen also in consciousness, except they're not what we call material experiences. Now, I've said this before, that matter is the interpretation of perceptual experiences. Therefore, matter is an experience, but it is not a fundamental nature of the world. Matter is, once again, a perceptual process. Just replace the word object with perceptual process, and you'll begin to understand that in the deeper reality there is no such thing as matter. It feels hard, solid, but all it is perceptions. Smell, taste, touch, seeing, all of that, okay? Okay, so this is the richness of experience that we have. I've defined the full range of them right now. And we call experience reality. We call every experience reality, because that's our reality. But it is not fundamental reality, obviously. Fundamental reality is that which makes experience possible, which is, of course, consciousness. So now let's go into some very fundamental principles, and here they are. Reality is different in different states of consciousness. That which we call the brain is also functioning differently in different states of consciousness. Knowledge is different in different states of consciousness. Perception is different in different states of consciousness. Emotions are different in different states of consciousness, and thoughts are different in different states of consciousness. So as our consciousness shifts, everything shifts. That which we call reality shifts, and our life is a continuum of experiences. Okay. From birth to death, it's Zara Masudas's heartbreaker reality. For the one who's having it, of course it's a reality. Okay, so as our consciousness shifts, then everything shifts. Everything shifts. Experience shifts. And therefore, that which we call reality shifts. Now, there are many maps that have been created throughout the ages of how these states of consciousness express themselves as not only our fundamental needs, but also as our fundamental insights into the nature of reality. So if you go through the chakra system, for example, then the first chakra represents survival and safety, and a person who's basically in that mode will experience everything with fear. The second chakra has to do with sensuality and the richness of sensual experience and sexual experience, and a person who's dominantly in that mode will be seeking always sensual delight in everything. Of course, as we see, there has to be a balance in all these chakras, which are just metaphors for, in a way, states of consciousness, but metaphors also as junction points between what we call consciousness and biology. Okay, so the second chakra has to do with sensuality, sexuality. The third has to do with power. Here, emanates from here. Ego and intersubjective power. This chakra has to do with love and relationship and compassion and empathy and the joy that comes from being the receiver and giver of love. Okay. Then you have this chakra, which has to do with creative expression in every way, artistic, scientific, and creatively creating the life that you want. This chakra has to do with clarity of insight, intuition as well. And finally, the crown chakra has to do with self-realization or self-actualization, or what is called enlightenment. Okay, so that's one way of looking at the range of experience. We can also see that these actually create certain kinds of biological responses, so you can say the first biological response is fight or flight. The second biological response is reactive responses, ego responses, the desire to control, to manipulate, to be validated, desire for fame, fortune, all of that. So in balance, everything is good, right? Has to be. Otherwise, we wouldn't have these responses. So you have the fight-flight response, you have the reactive response, you have the centered awareness response, where you have silence in you in the midst of dynamic activity. So you carry your silence wherever you go. Then the fourth response would be the intuitive response. Intuition is a form of intelligence that is contextual, relational, holistic, doesn't have a win-lose orientation, goes beyond cause-effect relationships, eavesdrops on the cosmic mind. And then you have the creative response, which is a change in context, meaning, relationship, and story. Then you have the archetypal response, the response of sages and seers and prophets and wizards. And then finally you have the sacred response, which is you are totally aware that the self in you is the self of the universe. The self of the individual is the self of the universe. So you see, there are so many ways of relating to this. In the Vedanta, there are 7 states of consciousness. So waking, dreaming, sleeping, which we are all familiar with. And then there's something called soul consciousness or transcendental consciousness, where you're in touch with the observer in the midst of the observation. There's something called cosmic consciousness, which is local and non-local awareness at the same time, even in waking, dreaming and sleeping. There is divine consciousness, where we become aware that every object of our perception is actually a modified form of our own consciousness. And then there's something called unity consciousness, where we see that we have a personal body and a universal body, but in the deeper reality we are the universe. Okay, so many ways of understanding this. What about science? Science is a particular methodology, a system of thinking in waking state of consciousness, where there is intersubjective agreement on how we observe what we call facts, but there are modes of knowing. But also there's agreement on protocol, or how we do experiments, and how we define our theories. So it's a loop of theory, observation, validation, replication, falsifiability, etc., etc. It's a very good method for creating technology and all the things that we now take for granted in our modern world, right? This communication that's happening is a gift of science. But science cannot give you the meaning of love, and science cannot give you a deeper understanding of who you are, or why you exist, and the purpose of life, or how do we together create a more joyful experience for all of humanity. You know, the scientific method can help in creating the technologies, but the desire to do that comes from our spirit. So science is very useful, but not for everything, okay? It's a particular map. Theology is another map, philosophy is another map, religion is another map. But the highest map is self-awareness. So as we begin to practice self-awareness by being aware of our body, by being aware of our breath, by being mindful of our perceptual experiences, by being aware of sensations inside the body, what is called interoception, by being aware of the choices we are making in every moment. And after a while, this should all become automatic. Then we can also wake up in sleep. We can wake up to awareness in sleep. So the body is completely resting in deep sleep, but there is a wakefulness of awareness in deep sleep, or wakefulness of awareness in the dream state, where we've mentioned before, during these states there's proliferation of uncertainty and therefore creativity as well. And then we can wake up to the experience of consciousness in every object of our perception, because every object of our perception is a modified form of our own self. We may call it an object, but it is, it's our self. And that's the ultimate truth. That's what it means to say, you are the universe. I am the universe. Aham Brahmasmi. Tattvamasi. Tattvamasi. I am that. You are that. All this is that. That alone is. So, I hope I've answered your question. When you don't like something that's happening to you, then don't try and go out there and fix it. Ask yourself, what am I doing in a state of consciousness where this is happening, whatever is happening around you at that moment. Because in every moment of our life, what we're experiencing as body, mind, and universe is, in a sense, a projection of our conditioned self. It is a projection of our conditioned self, the state of the body, the state of the mind, the state of our emotions, the state of our experience is a projection of our conditioned self. And our identity shifts. So, when we are in the fight or flight response, our identity is we are survivors. When we are in the ego response, the identity is we are succeeding in life, and that's important, to win, succeed. As we move into the centered awareness response, the identity starts to become the silent witness of all experience. Intuitive response, there's a silent witness, but that also knows what's going on in the background, the deeper meaning of what is really happening. In the creative response, we become innovators and creators. In higher consciousness, we join the world of prophets, seers, sages, and wizards. And then what happens in the enlightened state is that we recognize ourselves as the source of the universe. So I think somebody just said, just change thoughts. No, you can't just change thoughts. It's very hard to change thoughts, because your thoughts are also a representation of your state of consciousness. If you try to change your thoughts, that's a thought itself. Trying to get rid of a thought is a thought itself. So as our consciousness evolves, thoughts change in the direction from fear to love by themselves. Okay, feelings change, emotions change, relationships change, social interactions change, and we find ourselves in an environment that is also a reflection of who we are in that state of consciousness. The beauty of this is that this is a never-ending journey in a sense, and it's great. Our soul takes a journey through cosmic time. By soul, I mean consciousness, the individual consciousness that has been programmed by memory, karma, desire, till ultimately there is the realization that in choiceless awareness, all evolves by itself. Okay, I hope I've answered your question. Thanks again for supporting the book. You are the universe, discovering your cosmic self and why it matters. Keep sending your questions to the discussion forum, and then we'll be all set. Ultimately, we want to have complete knowledge of our self as the web of relationship in which the entire universe is arising and subsiding in every now, right now. Thank you.